Unless you want to see a bitch sweat till he dead, then you'll deal with the AC in the background. Hi everybody, today I'm going to be recommending some books for the Contemporary-A-Thon as well as sharing the 2 books maybe that I plan on reading during that week. It's hosted by Chelsea, Julia, and Natasha, all of whom I love very much. I will leave their channels linked in the description down below so you can get more information about the readathon and also subscribe to them because they are amazing. There are 7 challenges, so one is to read the most recent contemporary that you purchased. I wouldn't be recommending anything for those because I don't know what was the most recent contemporary that you all purchased. Read a contemporary book with pink on the cover, so some of these will have pink on the cover. Read a hyped contemporary book, some of these are definitely quite hyped. Read a diverse contemporary book, all of these with the exception of one of them maybe are diverse books, and they're also all own voices. Read a dark/taboo contemporary. Now I'm not sure if any of these are considered dark books, but some of them do have dark themes in them, so I guess you could count them towards that challenge if you want. I will throughout the video explicitly say what those themes are, so if you're sensitive to any of those things you'll know where to proceed with caution. Challenge number 6 is to read a contemporary-ish graphic novel. I really can't recommend anything because I don't really read graphic novels. If I had to think of something on the top of my head, read Fence by C.S. Pacat and Joanna the Mad, but I don't have any graphic novels in this pile to recommend. And the final challenge is to read a contemporary book that has been recommended to you. All of these books will be recommended to you, so they all count towards this challenge. So I have 10 books to run through, 5 YA books and 5 adult books because I just wanted to have like an equal mix of both. If you like middle grade, I really didn't put together any middle grade contemporaries and I haven't really read that much middle grade contemporary. The first 2 I can think off the top of my head are George by Alex Gino, which is an own voices trans fiction novel about a young girl called Melissa who is discovering her transness, and oh my god, there's a spider right there, and this book has Charlotte's Web in it, and I'm talking about it, and that spider bitch is right there. My god, look at her climb. Bitch, what you doing in my room? Get the fuck up. The next middle grade book I would recommend is a very popular one, and that is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. The movie is coming out, so this would be a really good time to read it. It's about a boy called Augie, I think is his name, and he has a facial anomaly. So if you want to read a book about a boy who experiences life that way, definitely read this one. So now we're jumping into the 5 young adult books that I would like to recommend, and the first one is of course I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erika L. Sanchez. I have been raving about this book since I read it at the beginning of last month, and I am not going to stop because I love it. It's set in Chicago and we're following Julia, whose older sister Olga passed away. Olga was the embodiment, the epitome of the stereotypical perfect Mexican daughter, but after her death, upon discovering some very unexpected evidence, Julia begins to realize that this was very much not the case, and she didn't know a lot of things about the life that her sister led. So the book very heavily deals with grief and suicide and depression. It deals with how the loss of a loved one can affect a family and the family's relationship with each other. It's ultimately though a coming-of-age story about a girl who learns to find herself in the absence of someone who she loved, and I absolutely adored this book. Y'all need to read it. The next YA contemporary I have to recommend is Saints and Misfits by S.K. Ali. This one is about a Muslim American girl called Jana Yusuf, and at the beginning of this book we learn that a very prominent member of her Muslim community, whose name was Farouk, sexually assaults her. So the entire story is about how she deals with the internal struggles of this particular incident, how she deals with the trauma, and how she learns to find her voice and stand up for herself. There's also really wonderful friendships in here and a really good family dynamic, and I think one of my favorite things about this book is the amount of characters that we were introduced to. But ultimately I loved it because it is the first YA contemporary book about a Muslim girl who wears the hijab that I've ever read before, and I definitely think that we need to see more of this in YA literature. So read it and read more and demand more because this is an important book and everybody needs to talk about it. The next YA book I read recently, and that was Far From the Tree by Robin Benway. I would have also mentioned this in my January wrap-up. This is the story of 3 biological half-siblings who were all separated at birth, and they are now reconnecting in their late teens to hopefully start to form a relationship with each other. In addition to following them as they embark on that, we're also learning a lot about their own individual lives and how their experiences have come to shape them into the persons that they are. This book had a lot of great things to say about family, so if you're interested in reading a book, a YA novel that is very heavily focused on family, you'll need to read this one. Next up we have the book that I named my favorite of 2017, and that is of course The Lines We Cross by Randa Abdelfatah. This one is set in Australia, and in it we're following Michael and Mina. Michael's parents are very conservative and they start this organization called Aussie Values, which is very right-winged, very anti-Islamic, very anti-refugee, anti-immigration in its rhetoric. Then we have Mina, who came over to Australia as an Afghani refugee when she was a young child, and it's the story of how these 2 characters meet and how they work out their differences, and it is one of the best YA contemporary books that I've read in a very long time. Again, just really great friendship and family stuff, and not to mention it is an important and timely read that everybody should be reading, and nobody talks about this book, so y'all need to fix that and read it. And the final YA contemporary that I have to recommend is Noteworthy by Riley Renegade. I like to describe this book as Pitch Perfect meets Mulan meets Victorious. Pitch Perfect in the sense that we're following a girl called Jordan who is attending this boarding performance arts high school, don't know what to call it, something along those lines, and she decides to join an a cappella group, and the a cappella dynamic, in addition to the just overall quirkiness of the book, was very reminiscent of Pitch Perfect. I also say Mulan because the main character Jordan, the a cappella group that she wants to join, is an all-boys a cappella group, and she can't join the group, so she disguises herself as a boy to join the group. And it's about how she tries to hide this secret and lead this double life, and that reminded me a lot about Mulan and, you know, all of the different things that she went through when she decided to join the army. I also like comparing this one to Victorious because of the friendship dynamic within the context of a performance arts high school. Also, as per diverse representation, the main character in this book is Chinese American, and she's also bisexual and is discovering her sexuality throughout the story. So if for no other reason, just pick this book up for that alone. Right, so now we're getting into the adult contemporary books. These might be classified as literary fiction, which is my second favorite genre, second to YA contemporary, of course. But they do take place within a contemporary time setting reality, if that makes sense, so I'm counting it towards that. First up, we have In the Country by Mia Alvar, which is a short story collection that follows a bunch of Filipino people across the diaspora and in the Philippines itself. It's set throughout like the early 2000s, maybe the 1990s and 80s, but I still consider that to be contemporary. If you want to learn more about the Philippine diaspora, and if you want to read some really great and impactful short stories, definitely go ahead for this one. It's a hidden gem, nobody ever really talks about it, which is sad because it's a good book. Next up, I have You Go Bernadette by Maria Semple, which is one of my OG faves. It reads like YA because we have a main character who is 15 years old, and it has that kind of angsty quirk towards it as well. Her name is Bee, and we are following her as she and her family are very excitedly planning a trip to Antarctica, but in the midst of everything, her mother, Bernadette, who is very unreliable, she is agoraphobic, she has anxiety, she's going through a lot. Within the midst of everything, she disappears. So the book becomes kind of like a detective mystery-ish novel, but more leaning towards comedy, about how this girl Bee tries to find her mother Bernadette and how dedicated she is to finding her mother. I absolutely adore this book. It's told in epistolary style format, so there's like diary entries and emails and like documents and stuff, so if you want something like that, something a bit different, this is definitely one that I would recommend. Next up, I highly recommend that you pick up Anna in Between by Elizabeth Nunez. It's set in my country of Trinidad and Tobago, so hey, bias, had to put this one in there. It's about a middle-aged Trinidadian woman who returns home to visit her parents, and upon doing so, she realizes that her mother has breast cancer. So the story is about how she helps her parents come to terms with this reality because they're very much in denial about it. It's difficult to explain this story because there's really no plot, like the book just goes as it comes, if that makes sense, and then across it we get really great discussions about class, about privilege, about race, about history, about so many great and wonderful things that pertain to Trinidadian and the wider Caribbean society. So I highly recommend this book. It's also very easy to read for something that is a literary fiction, so if you want to read something really fast but also extremely impactful and a bit more serious, I definitely highly recommend that you pick up this one. Then we have Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I have a whole video about why you should read this book, so definitely go check that video out. This book is set in Nigeria and ended up following 15-year-old Kambili and her older brother Jaja as they leave their father's abusive household to go and live with their very liberal-minded aunt. And in doing so, Kambili, throughout the story, begins to unlearn all of the things that she thought to be inevitable that she experienced with her father. It's also a very easy to read book. It deals with some very hard and harsh topics, but it's beautiful at the same time. It's extremely impactful. It brushes on some very interesting and serious and necessary conversations. Again, I recommend that you go and watch my entire video about why I recommend this book. And the final book that I have to recommend is A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki, which is my favorite book of all time. Now, I will say that this book does have some elements of magical realism in it, so it's not like fully a contemporary novel, but I would still count it. If you didn't know, this one is the story of a woman called Ruth who finds the diary of a young girl called Naoko. So we're reading the story of this woman who is reading this diary, and we're also reading this diary of a very mysterious Japanese teenager. It ties together little bits of magical realism and philosophy to explain the story. It touches on suicide, it touches on bullying, it touches on some very harsh topics that deal with Japanese society, but it's a book that ultimately tries to explore the relationship between a reader and a writer, which is very important, and this is one of those books that you can have like a real like inception moment with, and that's why I absolutely adored it. Camera shift, again, I'm just so bad at this whole thing. This is what happens when you don't plan your videos and you just turn on the camera and you just start to spew nonsense from your mouth. I forgot to show you all the 2 books that I plan on reading for Contemporary-A-Thon, and they're right here. First we have You Know Me Well by Nina Lacour and David Levitan. This one is about a boy called Mark and a girl called Kate, and they're both gay and they are friends at first sight. That's the tagline for this book. That's pretty much all I know. It's following them as they embark on a new friendship, which is cute. And then we have Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. This one has been getting a ton of hype lately, and it's going to completely challenge for reading a dark or taboo contemporary because it is a YA thriller. A black girl, I think her name is Mary, and she is accused of killing a white baby, but that might not necessarily have been the case. We don't know. So that's kind of what the book is about, discovering what went on behind the scenes of this mystery, and it sounds really cool. I think I'm going to like it. But that's everything I have for this video. If you read any of these books, obviously I would love to know your thoughts on them in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day, and until next time, inshallah, keep reading.